Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is a CIS 320 lesson. This is about computer network drawings. And if you wanted to look in your textbook, Chapter 9 of the textbook, the step-by-step Microsoft Visio 2013, it talks about making computer network diagrams. I am not going to work through that chapter. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you what I consider to be a pretty good computer network diagram, and it includes three different types of computer network diagrams in that one drawing. I'll explain to you what you were seeing and where the shapes came from and how it was built. But I'm not going to walk through the step-by-step that's in Chapter 9. The last portion of Chapter 9, it talks about something called creating rack diagrams, as well as mapping LDAP services on a network, and specific reports that you can run for computer network drawings. And so I'll allude to those towards the end, but mainly what I want to do is work through this particular drawing with you. This is a drawing. You can see that's on an 8.5 by 14 piece of paper. It's a pretty big piece of paper. That's a legal size page. And what you see on the page, some of it should look pretty familiar to you. We've worked with these state shapes before, and in this case what we're looking at is a diagram for a company called Emily's Music. And at Emily's Music, they have what's called a wide area network, which spans 2 different states. They have facilities in Idaho and Oregon. And so I need to get some terms. I need to share some terms with you so that you can talk the same language that I'm talking for the next few minutes. A wide area network is something like the internet. It's basically a network, a computer network. Let's start there. A computer network is when you have 2 or more computers connected to each other. In the most basic sense, if you have 2 devices that can talk to one another, that is a computer network. And then we categorize networks based on their size. And so we can have anything from a personal area network, which basically would be like if you're using like your smartphone as a hotspot and your laptop is connected to it in your phone. So between your phone, your laptop, and a tablet, those 3 things would consist of your personal area network. It's maybe 10 feet wide. That's the smallest example. If you went up to something that incorporated maybe your apartment or your house, that's something called a local area network. Think of like the building Grice Hall at WKU or Mass Media. That would be a local area network. And it's larger than your personal area network for sure, but it's still contained within a pretty small space, certainly within a building. If you go to all the networks for a city, that would be what's called a metropolitan area network. That's referred to as a MAN. You could think of Bowling Green's, the WKU's facilities in Bowling Green. We have stuff at main campus and we have stuff at South Campus, and those facilities have to talk to one another. That's our metropolitan area network. And then if you go to something even bigger, like the whole state of Kentucky, that would be a wide area network. So WKU's campus is in Elizabethtown, Glasgow, Owensboro, Bowling Green, all of those talking to one another. That makes up our wide area network. And so I'll run through those just from smallest to largest. You have PANs, LANs, MANs, and WANs. And so when you're looking at a network diagram drawing, if you see a cloud, and in this case you have a cloud right here in the center of the drawing, that's supposed to represent the wide area network. Now these little lightning bolts that you see here connecting individual cities, these are called comlinks. And so what you want to do is basically take your local area networks or your metropolitan area networks and connect those to the wide area network through your comlinks. And so this is just pretty standard practice when you're looking at a computer network diagram. What am I seeing? Well, that's what it is. And so with this drawing, we have facilities for Emily's Music in Eugene, Oregon, and we have facilities in Sandpoint, Idaho, and we have facilities down here in Idaho Falls. So these three cities, these three different LANs or metropolitan area networks, depending on how large they would be in those cities, those connect to one another to create this wide area network. The whole connection, the connection of the three together is what makes up this cloud, this wide area network. So as we look at this document, you'll note that the different shapes here for the MANs or the LANs are actually hyperlinks. And so if you click on one of these, I'll hold down Control and I'll click on Sandpoint, for example. It takes me to that individual network, which makes up this part of this wide area network. This is what you guys are going to have in your dorm room or your apartment. And this type of example, this is a local area network, or a little almost like a personal area network that almost all of us have in our residences. How does this work? Well, you have a cable or DSL or satellite internet connection, right? And so you get a modem or a router from your internet service provider, and that modem or router connects you to the wide area network, all right, basically to the outside world. And so that device, that router, is the main point of entry for or the main way that everybody inside of the network can get to the internet or the wide area network. Inside of this network here, it's really simple. There's a laptop, a printer, a fax machine, and a smartphone. And whether these are connected wirelessly or wired, right now they just have the connector going from point to point to point. You could use a different shape if you wanted to use like wireless instead of having a line connecting. That might indicate that there's actually a wire going from one to the other. You could use a different shape that shows that it's definitely wireless. But these four components make up the guts of this segment of this wide area network for Emily's Music. Where did these come from? Well, as we look at the stencils, there are a number of different networking stencils. I like these 3D shapes just because I've been using Visio so long that these used to be the networking shapes. And so, they look like an actual device. The more current shapes for network diagrams are not three-dimensional. They're you just see the front face of something. But these are the 3D examples of these shapes. And as you go through these different stencils here, I'm going to go with the servers as an example. You have different types of servers. You have file servers and web servers and email servers and database servers. And so you can choose these different shapes and you just put them on the page, and then you connect those to one another with the connector tool to build your network. Here, the network and peripherals, this particular segment of the at least parts of this part were put together with what you see here. You have printers here. We have PCs and Apple computers that we'll find in here. We have copiers and scanners. The kind of stuff that you'd find in a typical home network. You have a router in here, and so these different stencils for network shapes, they're part of the templates for computer network drawings, and so that's how this was put together. Let me go to our next location, Idaho Falls. Idaho Falls is what's called a ring network, and what that refers to is the topology, basically the ways that the wires run and how this particular network was put together. This is a bigger network. This would probably be at one of the home or one of the small offices perhaps for Emily's Music. This one over at Sandpoint is at a person's house. At this point, we're probably looking at the network for like a salesman that works out of their house, and so this is really small. If we go to Idaho Falls, this is a little bit bigger. We know that because as we look at this, we have several servers. We have e-commerce. We have an e-commerce server. We have a streaming media server. Perhaps Emily's Music is a company that maybe sells instruments or things like that, but maybe it's Emily's Music is a company that hires artists and like, you know, they represents different musical songwriters and stuff like that. So maybe this streaming media server is one that holds all the audio files for the artists that they represent. And the e-commerce server would be one where people can buy the music that's available from the media server. So this is a bigger network. You'll see that there are various computers here. We have the human resources personal computer and the accounting personal computer, as well as a Mac for the art department. This type of shape it looks like a little brick wall. This is called a firewall, and what that represents is the software that's on your computer that protects it from protects your computer from malicious network traffic. And on a network, a lot of times the firewall is actually built into the router devices themselves. So sometimes in this case, there's a piece of a Cisco firewall. There's a company called Cisco that makes a lot of this networking equipment. And in this case, this appliance its sole purpose is to monitor the traffic going from the Ring network to the router to get out to the wide area network, and making sure that no bad stuff comes in and no bad stuff goes out. And so that's what that Cisco firewall shape is representing. So that's you know, this what you're seeing in this particular drawing. And our next one, Eugene, Oregon. This would be our biggest one. Maybe this is like the home office or the company offices for the entire organization. We see a couple of shapes in here that you need to be familiar with, or I'd like for you to be familiar with. These cylinders that you see right here, these look like the cylindrical timelines that you guys worked with when you created timelines. In this instance, what they represent is something called an Ethernet. And the Ethernet it's a standard, a networking standard, and it's something that describes how you have the computers on a network talk to one another. And just about every network that we have at Western is an Ethernet network. And so if you were going to be drawing your network drawings for Grice Hall or MMTH or for Cherry Hall, you most certainly would be making Ethernet diagrams. And so what you do is you go to the network shapes stencil. Let me find that real quick. It's here on the network and peripherals, Ethernet, and you drag this out. Let me just jump out to where I can see the whole page. You drag an Ethernet shape and you put it on the page, and then you find the individual computers. Let's say we want to connect that server to our network. I'll zoom in here to touch so you can see this. And you just grab the connector from the Ethernet shape, and then you, somewhere in here is a connector. It will glue to this thing if I can just find it. It's in the middle. Take this dude right there, so it connects it. So then as you move this shape around, it will stay connected to that Ethernet shape. And so that's how these two different branches of the network were put together. An Ethernet shape, I placed it on the page and I put these various servers on there and labeled them, and then placed the firewall in the center, you know. And so that's what you're looking at there. And the way that you would interpret this drawing is basically this Ethernet network has a public part, which is what you see on the left side. This is where the web server is. So if you wanted to look at the Emily's Music web page, you would visit their website and be provided to you on this side of the network. And then behind this big Cisco ASA firewall, all their personal stuff is residing. We have like our file servers and database and print and email servers back here, because we don't want bad guys from the outside to be able to just access these easily. Then we have like individual personal computers in here and printers, and so the whole thing is connected to our wide area network through that comlink. And I have this drawing set up so that if you when I make a network diagram, I like to make it so if you have a wide area network page and then individual components that you can go back and forth through by clicking. Go back to Idaho Falls here and go back to the home page. So that's how these these drawings were put together. Back at Idaho Falls, this ring network, there's the shape for it right there, and it same deal. You drag the ring network shape out here, you find your individual computers, and then you connect those to the shape, the ring network, and so that's how that is accomplished. It's really easy to make a network diagram, but understanding what it's telling you is the main thing I want you to take away from this lesson, because you've worked with Visio enough now that dragging and dropping and connecting shapes is nothing to you, and also like labeling, and then like doing the pretty stuff like putting a different background on each page, making links from this page back to the home page. You guys know how to do that, but instead what I wanted to do is spend time showing you different types of networks. In this case, you've seen Ethernet, ring network, and like a personal area network, and how those would all relate to a big wide area network sort of environment. Now, back in your book on page 365, they talk about something called creating rack diagrams. If you go into information technology as your major, you will get into that. We don't need to cover it here. That's too much into the weeds. Rack diagrams are things that look kind of like they're about the height of a phone booth. I don't know if you guys remember phone booths or not. They're real tall. They're made of metal, and then inside of the rack cabinet, they look almost like think of it like a really big file cabinet size thing, and then it's just the corners are what the rack consists of, and then inside of that structure you can secure with screws and bolts individual computing components, individual servers. And so if you've ever seen video footage of stuff from like a data center from like Google or any sort of search, Bing or any sort of search provider, they have these tons and tons of these rack servers. And so if you go into IT as your profession, you'll get to where you're working with rack servers and building those, and at that point you can learn how to draw those. So there's some discussion of that in the book. Now it also talks about specific reports. This is on page 381. It talks about how Visio contains pre-built reports, and we worked at the flowchart one, we worked with the inventory one. Many of the pre-built reports have to do with computer network stuff, because IT guys use this program a lot to make diagrams like the ones that you're looking at right now. And so having the ability to run pre-built useful reports was a good idea for Microsoft. They included that. In our instance, when I have you guys, I may have an assignment where I make you create a report, and if I looked at the shape data for this drawing, let me pull up the shape data, you'll see like we can have information about what is the asset number, the location, the manufacturer of these different devices, and I haven't provided it, or I haven't populated the data in this particular case. So what I could do is I could give you this drawing. I could say, hey, this server is made by Dell. It has 64 gigabytes of RAM, and it has a 3 terabyte hard drive. It was installed on this date. It costs this much. It's going to depreciate this much, and you have to input all of that data for a bunch of these different servers and PCs and printers, and do that for each of the different locations, and then make you create your own page, and then run a report that tells me all that stuff for the 3 different locations back on that new page. That's how I might test you guys for your reporting ability, by using a drawing like this one. So, and in that case, I'm going to have you create a custom report as opposed to running a pre-built one. But that's talked about in the book. The plethora of pre-built reports that have to do with computer stuff. Lastly, it gets into searching and replacing text, and that's just kind of a novelty thing. I never actually used that feature. Lastly, it talks about mapping Active Directory and LDAP, and LDAP is the Lightweight Duty Application Protocol. There used to be an ability to do that stuff for free in the program, and they removed that. I think networks got so complicated that the Visio program wasn't able to keep up and provide that feature so it performed well. So they removed that functionality. But you can buy add-ins for Visio which do that for you. So what Active Directory is, Active Directory is a Microsoft product which basically allows you to take all your users and then put them into categories. So for example, and we use this at Western. So for example, I'm a faculty member, and so as a faculty member, I'm able to do stuff on Blackboard that you guys can't because you guys are students. And so because I'm in the bucket for faculty within Active Directory, when I log in, the Blackboard server can basically ask the question to Active Directory, hey, is this guy faculty? It says, yeah, he's in the faculty bucket. Okay, let him do tasks X, Y, and Z, whereas students just get to do A, B, and C. And so that's what Active Directory is. And so if you want the LDAP and Active Directory mapping services, then by all means you can get those, but you typically have to pay for those. And so and there are a number of third-party companies which create that software, and you can evaluate which of those would work best in your particular situation. So that's information presented to you in Chapter 9. And again, I just mainly wanted you to see the different kinds of network diagrams and what they might look like and how they would connect to one another in a wide area network environment. Let me go back to the home page. And if you ever have a need to create this kind of drawing, I think you'll be very well prepared to do that. But I wasn't sure if you'd be able to actually read it or understand what you're looking at. So that's what the purpose of this one primarily was. So thanks for your time and attention. Have